This video is all about real photography tips. I'm calling them real photography tips because they're tips that have been provided to me by fellow photographers. And to help me pick the bones out of the tips and discuss the tips, I'm going to be joined by one of my favorite vloggers on this planet. From stateside, it's Nick Page. On top of that, somebody is going to be a lucky recipient of this Compagnon camera backpack to the value of 380 euros. You probably already know that though, because it's in the thumbnail, I'm guessing, although I haven't already made the thumbnail. Hi guys, and welcome to this week's video. Because this Compagnon backpack is such a fantastic prize, and it's actually quite valuable as well, like I say, 380 euros, let me very briefly explain the rules to you. Everybody whose photography tip is featured in this video, whether it's one Nick and I discusses or whether it's one that comes up at the bottom of this screen, everybody from those 35 tips is listed on this bit of paper. Next to their names is a corresponding number. In actual fact, let me put it up on the screen now so you can see it. Now, in the name of fairness, because I originally whittled all those tips down to 35, all of those 35 names will go into a hat. Also, because there are some duplicates in there, so other people have mentioned the same tip, shall we say, I also put their names in the hat as well, just to be completely fair. So I've now got a list of 47 names. At the end of this video, it's not, remember, the best tip wins. Absolutely not. I did say that last week. Everybody who features in this video literally is in here. At the end of the video, I'm just going to pull you out at random, and whoever's name I pull out will be, like I say, the recipient of this fantastic camera backpack courtesy of Compagnon. Thank you very much indeed. Right, time to say hi to Nick. Good to see you. How are you, mate?
It's good to see you too. I'm doing okay. This is what is this? This is 2 days in a row that we've got to talk because of my technical difficulties.
Well, it's not really the technical difficulties. Just so you guys know, what actually happened was Nick and I got together yesterday and we filmed Nick and I talking about the tips. The problem was I really created a short list of 35 tips, which were way too long. And obviously Nick being passionate and I myself being passionate, really we were talking for over an hour and we hadn't even got halfway through the tip. So we had to really knock it on the head. And I've collapsed that list down to 15. So that should be easier for us to squeeze in, Nick. What do you think?
I think so, but you're being too kind, because also the other reason that we couldn't use yesterday's is because, well, I decided not to save my video file, which is pretty unfortunate. In true 2020 style, it didn't record. It's always nice to know, like an hour into a conversation. But the good news is I get to talk to you again, Gary. So
I was being nice and polite. I can't believe you've ruined it now. You've ruined it.
Oh, well.
No one's going to pay a blind bit of attention to what we say now after you admitting that.
Yeah. But you know what? It's going to be even more concise and even more enlightening this time around.
Right. Okay. So really 35 tips from around about 200 tips that were sent to me. That's what I've managed to condense it down to. All of those 35 tips will appear on this video somewhere. So just keep it out along the bottom. So the tips that we don't mention now, it's just simply because they didn't make the top 15, in my opinion, not Nick's opinion. That's in my opinion. So I had to, obviously, yeah, it's my fault if we don't talk about your tip. Doesn't mean to say it's not very good. If it appears in this video, it's a tip that I thought was excellent. Okay, but obviously with time constraints and so on and so forth. And with Nick's inability to press the record button on his camera. Do you understand what I mean? That should be one of the tips. Right, should we crack on, Nick?
Let's do it.
Right, okay, tip number 1. I love this. Let's get off to a flying start. You only need 2 things if you want to be a landscape photographer. 1, an alarm clock. 2, the ability to get up when it rings. Oh, that's good.
So true. It's so true. I think that's the part of the reason that I consider myself a sunset photographer, is because those alarm clocks just tend to go off a little bit earlier than I wish they would. It's tough, and I totally agree. I think that as photographers, oftentimes, I think when we do get up, we enjoy a good sunrise shoot more typically than a sunset shoot, simply because a lot of times we have the place to ourselves because nobody else is crazy enough to get up at that hour and then hike into a place. So I'm never let down. I'm never sad that I got up. I'm always glad.
We love the winters for that very reason. Setting your alarm clock at 3 in the morning in the summer that's no fun, is it?
Yeah.
It's no fun.
I like setting my alarm for the crack of 7, getting up at the crack of 7:30, somewhere in there.
Do you know, I like to think myself as being quite a disciplined person, and when the alarm goes off, I get up after about 3 snoozes, of course. But I'm terrible when I sleep in the van. So if I'm actually on location, and the chances are the alarm goes off, I peep out the window, and if I don't think I'm going to get anything from it, I just roll over and go back to sleep again. It's shocking. It's absolutely shocking.
It's very true. That's why you need a really uncomfortable roof tent like I have.
I've seen that.
It's not that uncomfortable, but typically you don't tend to sleep in as much because you're not as warm and cozy as you are in a van.
I love that. Well done, Gordon. That's a great tip. There's lots of people have mentioned similar tips, by the way, and if they've mentioned similar tips, your name will also go in a hat, or in the hat. In actual fact, I have it here, so I will be drawing the winner out at the end of this video, so be sure to stick around for that. We won't comment on it, but it's in the same bracket. You could have the best gear in the world, but it's no good unless you get out there. That's from Duncan Spence, so thanks, Dunk. Great tip. Okay, next one. Absolutely love this one as well. It's the Indian who shoots the arrow.
So true. I've seen amazing photography by an amazing photographer with an old, what we would consider an old archaic digital camera. It's more about what you do with the tool that you have in hand. The tool will make things easier for you, and a lot of times it'll make the shooting experience more enjoyable. Maybe it'll make the post-processing experience a bit more enjoyable because you have more dynamic range and didn't have to bracket or whatever. But in the end, it's the photographer that really produces the end result more so than the tool that they were utilizing.
No excuses. Yeah. Sometimes you can just read a sentence and it just means so much. It's fantastic. So he even goes on to quantify the most expensive gear is no guarantee for a good picture. Martin, never a truer word spoken.
Yep.
Absolutely brilliant.
A lot of people, I see it a lot in my workshops, and when I go out and shoot with some people that don't get out. Some people have more time than money. Other people have more money than time. And that second batch of people, they tend to try to buy the latest and the greatest, hoping that when they finally do get out to go do photography, that it'll make them a better photographer. But the unfortunate thing is you got to do it. You got to practice it. And there's no replacement for just getting out and doing it. You can have the best gear in the world, but if you're still shooting in JPEG or if it's the practice is really where the improvement happens.
Agree wholeheartedly. I don't need to say any more about that. I love that. Next tip coming from Jeff. Do not let photography rules rule your photography. This is interesting. He says here, this is not to say that you snap your shutter at whatever you see and out of laziness, I love this bit, out of laziness, call it unconventional art. So true. So rules, let's just very briefly talk about rules of photography.
Yeah, I think that, I feel like when you're starting photography, when you're still in those early growing stages of your photography journey, call it, those rules are pretty important. You know, I feel like as you're improving, it's important to know what the rules are. And then eventually, ideally, you get to a place with your photography where it becomes more intuitive, where you do things because it feels right. You know the rules, and you don't need to think about those as you're shooting or as you're post-processing or cropping or whatever, because you have that stuff, you know, embedded in the subconscious a little bit later on in the process. But I think in the earlier stages, those rules are important. But it's also important later on to grow past restricting yourself to those rules. So I agree to a point, you know, but I think that there's a time and a place for both.
Yeah, I certainly think when you're first starting out in photography, it's an absolute must. It's imperative that you learn the rules. And you know what's really strange? I've been doing photography for a long time, and I still find going against the rules goes against my very fabric as a photographer. I try to, but it's a rare shot that works if you go outside of rules of thirds. I can imagine now there'd be people cringing when I say that, but I'm just telling you, as it is for me. I'm a great believer of rules of thirds. Yes, I break it. Obviously, horizon in the middle if we're talking about a fantastic, reflection in the water, etc. However, balance is so important in a picture. It's so important.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's the good thing is that there's enough rules that you could usually find at least one of those rules that your image probably follows. Even if you think you're being very unconventional, there's probably a rule somewhere that, it's actually part of the Fibonacci sequence. You know, like you can find a rule most likely because there's so many of them.
Sure.
But I think as a person gets better, you think about the rules less and less because you're following what feels right. As an artist, you know, you get a sense for the aesthetic part of composing an image, I think. Sure.
I love that bit what he says about being, lazy photographers or people just, I agree. Yeah, fantastic. I love that. That's a good tip, actually. Next tip sent in from Anthony Giddins. Anthony, 3 words, keep it simple. Keep it simple. I like that.
Simple. Yeah.
I like that.
I definitely do. I think that, especially if we're thinking in terms of, compositional advice, I think a lot of beginning photographers or photographers that are still kind of growing, one of the problems that that you'll often see in their images is that you look at their image and you're not even really sure what the image is about because there's so much going on.
Sure.
And then when you compare that to a fine art photographer like Gary, you tend to see very clear subjects. You know exactly what that image is about because it's very clear, it's very simple. And I think that a lot of people, especially as they're growing as a photographer, can really benefit from, like you said, keep it simple.
Yeah, that's down to camera settings as well. Don't get too out of it. Keep it simple. Keep it simple. I do like that. I think that's a good tip. Quality. I know when you and I spoke about this yesterday. Quality versus quality.
This cost us a half hour of our time yesterday.
It really did. It really, really did. Nick, you go first. Good luck.
Yeah, quality versus quantity. So there's so many different different aspects of photography that this applies to. When you're in the field, there's something to be said for, okay, so when I think quality over quantity, I think of people like Thomas Heaton. Obviously, I'm friends with Thomas, and one of the main differences between he and I is that he'll hike 15 miles to take 1 frame or 2 frames maybe. And if I hike that far, dude, I'm going to try to fill my card up. I want to try to milk a location for every potential composition that I can find because I want my time to be very fruitful. And when I'm in the field, I'm often in this mode of of data collection. I'm not trying to take that one magical frame. I'm trying to slowly hone in on that one frame that I'm happy with. It just so happens that my workflow entails taking a whole bunch of photos to get to that, because
Sure.
I'm kind of like working a scene where I slowly hone in on what it is that I like about a particular scene. But then there's also times where you go to a location and there's multiple different compositions to take, and I don't want to limit myself to just this one when there's 3 over there. I want them all. I'm greedy that way. So in that case, I disagree with the quality over quantity. But where I do agree with quality over quantity is when we're talking about the imagery that you put out into the world. Just because I took 50 frames or 50 different compositions on this one particular shoot, I still want to boil it down to the best one or the best 2, and then post-process those and only put that one out into the world. People don't need to see that I filled up my card. They just need to see the final result of filling up my card. And that's where I think that the quality over quantity really matters, is in your own personal portfolio and the work that you put out into the world.
Yeah. Ditto all of that. It's almost like it's 10 pictures per gallon of fuel as well. So if I travel a greater distance, I'm almost making demands on myself to come back with more pictures. Does that make sense? If you just go around the corner, you don't mind grabbing a shot or 2. But if you go in a greater distance, you want to come back with more pictures. And
I think part of that is because a lot of times when you and I go out, we're also filming ourselves go out. And so we're putting in, we're already raising the bar of expectation. Like, not only would I like to get some photos, but I would also like to get at least one nice video from this trip. Sure. And like, the more expectations you pile on yourself, you start to go into data collection mode. And, to play devil's advocate and to spin this whole thing around on what I just said, because Thomas will only take 1 or 2 photos on that hike, and because I took 100 or 200, he's going to be far more sentimentally attached to those 2 photos. And those 2 photos are going to mean a whole lot more to him than my 400 are going to mean to me. So there is, that if you're going to play devil's advocate, there is that, like, you're going to be more sentimentally attached. You're going to be more attached to those 2 images than you are to the 400 that you happen to take.
Why don't we just gang up on him and tell him he's doing it wrong? Why don't we just say he's doing it wrong?
Well, because that's the thing, is there is no wrong in art. There's no right in art.
Give me that quote, Nick, and I'll use it on the thumbnail. We ramble about it like we know what's right and wrong, but we don't. It's like telling a musician that, their song is wrong. Can't do that. Yeah, I love that one. Great. I ditto all of that, by the way. Fantastic. Use exposure bracketing. Somebody's put here. Sorry, I haven't got his name on there, but his name is in the bag. Use exposure bracketing. Now, I've got a couple of issues with this.
Yeah, I do as well.
I do. First of all, I do use exposure bracketing sometimes. I do. I don't mind exposure bracketing, but I have a couple of issues with it. One is you can't shoot long exposures when you bracket, because when you bracket, you have to adjust the shutter speed and really nothing else. I know you can adjust the ISO, but then you're tampering with the quality of the image. So long exposures causes you a problem, but there's a worse one than that. In my opinion, especially as a teacher, if you're in the field, if you're on a one-to-one or in a group situation, that people want to look at the back of your camera once you've taken a picture. If you're explaining, look, this is how this works, now look at the results. It's very difficult to say, now imagine what the results will look like when I combine all those images when we get back in the studio or when you go home. People want to see the results now. Does that make sense?
It does. So ironically, as we record this, tomorrow my video on the subject will actually be going live. So I think my video will already be live by the time this video is released. So if you go over for those of you watching, if you go over to my YouTube channel, you'll see a video entitled Bracketing versus ETTR, meaning exposed to the right. And so the whole video is talking about the fact that there's a time and a place where bracketing makes sense, but there's a lot of places and times where bracketing does not make sense. And, one of the things that I find when I'm shooting with other people is oftentimes, I will be taking one exposure, exposing for my highlights and getting it all in one frame, even if it's a fairly high dynamic range scene. And the person next to me will be rattling off like a five bracket exposure bracket. Yeah. So sometimes there's good reason to bracket exposures. If you have a very static scene, you're not doing the long exposures as Gary's talking about, totally makes sense. But a lot of times people take those exposures and then they don't even really know how to stick them all together. You have to be pretty knowledgeable about exposure blending to, be blending 5 different exposures together, unless you're just throwing it into some kind of HDR plugin or just stitching it to HDR in Lightroom, which is still not the way to go. There's a lot of times where if you have any kind of movement in your scene, you have trees blowing in the wind or you have waves or anything moving at all, you should really try to avoid exposure bracketing, in my opinion, because things aren't going to line up anyway. But there are those times where bracketing helps. So if you're somebody that knows how to use luminosity masks and knows how to exposure blend, I think, go ahead and exposure blend or exposure bracket as long as you don't have a nice static scene. But other than that, you're better off to probably just expose for your highlights and do a little bit of shadow recovery and treat it that way.
Sure.
It's a loaded question, obviously.
Yeah, there's a couple of ways of looking at it. Adam from First Man Photography is a great example of that. He doesn't use filters, so he prefers to use exposure bracketing, which is
and that's me as well. I hate graduated filters. They are the devil. They are a destructive workflow, in my opinion, Gary. What do you think?
So, I love them. I absolutely. Well, I think I own 2, but I pretty much always use them. So let me throw the question back at you then.
Okay.
When you're, because I've often wondered this, when you're teaching, what happens in that instance? Whereby if I drop a neutral density filter on the top of my lens to bring the light down in the sky to balance it all out, I can show the results on the back of the camera. What do you do in that instance then if you have to bracket your exposures? What do you do to explain to your students? Basically,
I'll toggle between the two, and most times I'm not rattling off like a 5 shot exposure bracket. Usually I'm taking one for the sky, one for everything else. So it's pretty easy for me to toggle between the two and explain, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take the majority of this image with the shadow information, and then we're going to blend it with, boom, this 2-stop darker sky. We'll blend those together, and during my workshops, we always have a post-processing day where I show them how to do that, except for during COVID. But so that's a big part of the educational part of it for me as well, is because I'm a Photoshop nerd. So I love teaching the exposure blending side of things. The problem that I've always had, and we're going down a rabbit hole here, I feel the time slipping away, tick tock. The problem with graduated filters, in my opinion, is that I'm never photographing a flat horizon. So anything that is poking above that horizon is going to get darkened, even if it happens to be the mountain in the distance or the beautiful rock formation out in the water. That's going to get very dark. And I would rather just blend in a darker sky and exposure blend, because nothing is baked into the file. I can, if I'm struggling to exposure blend that properly, I can try for as many times as it takes me. It's never baked in. It's never permanent. I can continue to retry. So in my opinion, a filter can't be undone. So that's why I've never liked graduated filters, is because if you decide, oh man, I should have moved that filter a little bit, you can't go back and undo it unless you go back to the location and reshoot it.
Fair enough. I mean, the good thing to note from this is, very quickly before we move on, is, two different things here. There isn't a right and a wrong. There's what works for you at the end of the day. And that's it in simple terms, what works for you. But isn't it really amazing how, this is two working pros talking to each other, and we both do different things to achieve the same results. Isn't that great? That's a great thing about this job of ours.
It's like Jimi Hendrix talking to, I don't know, Eric Clapton. Like they play differently, I love post-processing and Photoshop and like the exposure blending part of it. I really nerd out about that stuff. So I kind of like giving myself a little bit of work to do in post-processing because I look forward to it. And I think that's maybe the difference between me and other people, is that like I like to set myself up with some obstacles because that means I'm going to have to jump over them, rather than like some people dread giving themselves obstacles because then they're going to have to jump over them,
Well, so 3 words. Use exposure bracketing. Blimey, that was a long one, wasn't it?
That's a half hour of our time that we'll never get back.
That's fantastic. Another one, simple. I love this sentence. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. I think he's making reference to lazy people. So if you're not out there, you've got to be in it to win it. God, there's so many different sayings along the lines of that. Yep,
you got to play to win, like the lottery.
Yeah, it's amazing how many people moan that they don't win the lottery. How often do you do it? Well, I don't do it. Well, there you go. Right, love it. So yeah, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. I so love that. Yep. Right, now we are going to have to be very brief on this one because I believe we spent another half an hour yesterday chatting about this one. I've got a simple answer to this, but 3 words: shoot in manual. Mike Cantwell mentioned that. A few people have mentioned this as well. So understand the relationship between aperture ISO and shutter speed, and shoot in manual until you feel comfortable.
100% agree. Like my son, I got him his first camera when he was like 7, and I never really even let him shoot in an auto mode. Like I was explaining to my 7-year-old how to shoot in manual because I'm a firm believer in the fact that if you take photography serious at all, you want to be in control over all of those like little creative decisions. And especially for us as landscape photographers, we're set up on a tripod. We have all the time in the world. There's no reason that you need an auto mode because it's not like you're hurried. So, especially for those, Gary and I, we both shoot a lot of seascapes and a lot of moving water. And that means that shutter speed becomes very important to the outcome of our photo. Why we wouldn't want to give that decision up to the camera, because the camera is just a dumb little box. Why should I think that we should be in control over that stuff because we're the creative mind behind the picture.
I mean, you can shoot landscapes, let's be honest, in a fully automatic mode or a semi-automatic mode. Of course you can. But if you really want to learn, you've got to shoot in manual. And not only that, but it's really easy. It's so damn easy.
It is.
God, there's so many YouTube videos out there. Just spend 5 minutes, and the minute when you say turn your camera to manual and get used to it, it's not over 3 years you'll get used to it. It's over one shoot. It's when you go out for a couple hours, you'll come back a proficient manual shooter. It is so easy.
Yeah, and like I said, we are photographers shooting on a tripod. It means that our camera is stationary. We're there for. It's not like things are changing and moving, and it's a very controlled environment where it's really easy to just throw it in a manual, put your ISO down to 100, and then think about your other settings. It's if there was ever a time that it would be easy to learn manual mode as a photographer, it would be doing landscape photography.
There is a vlogger out there with a huge channel. I won't mention any names, but when they take workshops, they only teach in aperture priority, and it's just mind-boggling. Why? Especially when you want to shoot long exposures, even if you're not into the sea, long exposures work great for the sky, etc., etc. How on earth do you calculate all of that if you only shoot in aperture priority? In my opinion, it's just lazy.
I'm not going to disagree.
We'll leave it at that, shall we? Next one. I think we're doing well here, actually. Don't just shoot sunrise and sunset. Okay. Don't just shoot sunrise and sunset. There's lots of things that you can shoot in different times of the day, and it says different weather conditions and so on, but it didn't really matter. The fact is, it's so important. Don't just shoot sunrises and sunsets. Yeah,
there's so many locations and like types of subject matter that photograph way better when the sun is higher in the sky. For example, like when I go to the Faroe Islands, the Faroe Islands have really consistent heavy cloud cover, and the cloud cover just goes for as far as you can see. But once the sun comes up a little bit, occasionally it'll peek through that cloud cover and you'll get that kind of spotlighty light on the landscape, or you'll get, rays of light streaming out of the clouds. And a lot of times that's the kind of light that you're looking for there. There's other shoots where, let's say in a forest, ideally you get like some light peeking through the forest and adding little backlit splotches of light on trees and stuff.
Yeah.
Every different location and subject matter has kind of an ideal or, several different options for lighting. And you see it a lot where you're at a location, or at least I see it a lot, especially here. I live in an area called the Palouse. Yeah. And the Palouse is rolling hills of agriculture. Think Tuscany, And a lot of times the best kind of light you have here is the 2 hours before sunset, where you have that golden light raking across and creating all the shadows in the hills. And it's amazing how many times I've been in a particular place called Steptoe Butte that is a very, heavily photographed location where you're up on this kind of peak and then you're shooting telephoto at all those rolling hills. Sure. It's amazing how many times that the light will finally fall down close to the horizon. The show will kind of be over. And then here will come like the workshop tour van where they're just now getting to the location because it's sunset. Yeah. It's amazing how many photographers just show up at sunset, take a couple photos, and then roll off. And when a lot of times the magic happens when the light is interacting with the landscape, and they can't do that, at sunset. It has to be before sunset. So totally agree.
Next tip, never try to be like another photographer. Again, I think you and I feel very strongly about this, and we had a long debate about this yesterday.
Yeah, this was another half hour. Our half hours from yesterday are really adding up.
Okay, what's your thoughts on that, Nick?
I think that I have to disagree with this one because, again, when you're just picking up photography, when you're in those first couple years, 3 years, for some people it's a decade. When you're in that first section of learning photography, I feel like one of the best ways to learn is to emulate other photographers. Go to Yosemite and take the tunnel view and pretend you're Ansel Adams for a day, or look at your favorite photographer. For me, when I was first starting, I wanted to be Ryan Dyer. Ryan Dyer's work is it's still super inspiring to me. And so it was really fun for me when I first started, witnessing that kind of work to go to some of the places he's gone to and like recreate a composition and then try to post-process it in a similar way. Like there's a lot that you can learn by emulating other artists. But where I do agree with the sentiment is that eventually you have to grow out of that. Just like a musician stops playing Smoke on the Water and Stairway to Heaven on guitar, eventually you want to write your own song, because that's where the creative fulfillment comes from. Because we're obviously, most of us here are going to be creative people, and a lot of the fulfillment comes from creating your own piece of art. And that's where you have to kind of get away from trying to be like other photographers. But I think in the very beginning, it's a very valuable tool for getting better.
Yep, I agree. Absolutely 100% wholeheartedly. What's wrong with copying somebody right down to the letter of the law? There's nothing better, especially when you're new to photography, when you go out and about with your camera. You want to come back with the picture that Nick took, or the picture that Thomas took, or even me, for it didn't really matter. The fact is, if you look up to somebody Oh, that sounded a bit pretentious, didn't it? But if whoever you want to try and emulate to them to the best of your ability until you become proficient at what you do, and then as you say, go off and be yourself.
Yeah, if you take any art class, there's going to be assignments where you're emulating the work of another artist. There's a very valuable lesson to be learned by dissecting and figuring out how an artist does what they do. And then once you learn that just becomes another tool in the toolbox that you can use for your own work down the road.
Sure.
There's a lot to be learned from being able to accurately emulate another artist.
I mean, there isn't a footballer alive that hasn't tried to emulate Messi or Ronaldo, for instance, two of the greatest footballers in the world. And I'm talking about fellow professionals. They want to know why they're on £1 million a week and they're only on £100,000 a week. Bless them. Must be tough for them, huh?
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. So we both disagree with that one, but we understand why you said it. That's Bill Foster. Cheers, Bill. Thanks a lot for that, mate. Before pressing the shutter release, turn off your technical head, stop and turn on your emotional head. It's where the image is. That's a bit deep, that one.
Yeah. And I agree with this one because I think that there's a lot of photographers that struggle with the creative side. And I think that it's because, especially digital photography, and we're dealing with these little technical black boxes, and we have all of our tools and all of our equipment, and it attracts a very technically minded person. A lot of times I feel like the technically minded photographers outnumber the super creative artsy fartsy photographers, and we talked about this yesterday as well, kind of where it's sometimes the engineers struggle with the creative aspect. And that's one of the weaknesses that I've had to work on with my own photography is I'm a very technically minded person. I love problem solving and gadgets and technology and that stuff. And where I've had to really grow is to learn how to be more creative. And I fully agree with this statement because a lot of times you get a technical minded person and they get so wrapped up in the functions of the tripod and get your camera settings all right, and then they look up and they're like, right, what are we taking pictures of? Sure. They're not connecting with their subject at all. And if you can get that engineer to connect emotionally and start thinking in a deeper way about what they're doing, it's going to drastically change their connection to their photography. I like it when I just ramble on and you just agree with everything I say. This is great, Gary.
Yeah. It's a deep one. It's a very, very deep one. I'm not sure I agree with it 100%. I think where the emotion is for me is to actually be there, and whatever I capture that. I don't know. It's a strange one, that. I do agree with what you're saying. I like the sentiment of the tip. I'm going to leave that one open-ended ever so slightly. Good one, though.
What a wishy-washy answer, Gary. Can give us something definitive.
Turn off your technical head, stop, and turn on your emotional head.
Well, and then that statement insinuates that they've already been in the technical place, so their technical side is going to be solid.
Yeah, I'm reading something else in that tip. I kind of agree with it. I think what it is with me, what makes me cringe is there are photographers out there, and they'll present fantastic videos, but they try and tell you their heads in the landscape, and I just don't. I love doing what I do. There is no better job in the world for me. But it stops there. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I will take a picture. I will sit down. If I'm on my own, I'll just look for an hour. And I just absolutely love just being there and doing what I do. There's no better job in the world as far as I'm concerned. But when people say, I'm feeling the land and I'm really emotionally attached to it, I just... Do you understand what I mean? To me, I think that's quite cringy. Maybe
I feel like you need some spiritual guidance, Gary.
I need to light some joss sticks.
I feel like we need to get you recentered. That's what
Well, look underneath.
No,
look,
I totally understand that. Like I struggle to think in that deep way because I'm the engineer, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm a very literal person, you know?
Yeah.
I think that it's different for everybody. But I also think that it's healthy to grow in the direction that doesn't come natural to you, to anybody as an artist. So if you're the very artsy person, those people need to grow in a more technical direction. The people like me that are more technical, they need to grow in a more like, let's get spiritual on this kind of direction, you know, like try to emotionally connect with my photography. And it's something I definitely struggle with because kind of getting back to the Thomas Heaton versus Nick Page angle, like I take so many photos. How can you be emotionally connected to any of them? Sure. And I think that in that case, there's an argument for me. Maybe I need to take fewer and try to say more with those fewer than just see it as a data collection thing. You know, I think growing in the direction that doesn't come natural is always a healthy thing.
I thought this was going to be an easy one. I thought that was going to be an easy one, you know. I really did.
You're just going to say, no, it's crap.
Do you know the good thing about this is, you know, I'm not saying I'm right. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm not saying you're right or I'm... It's just our interpretation. And, you know, you guys watching this now, you can either agree with us or disagree with us. It doesn't mean to say you're right or you're wrong. Absolutely. I love it. Yeah. Headspace. Yeah. Okay, we need to light some joss sticks, like I said earlier. 3 words. Oh, enjoy the journey.
Yes.
John Dalziel. He's written, many landscape photographers, in my experience, forget to enjoy the actual scenery around them, the sights and sounds. They are too focused on the pursuit of an ideal image or moment they want to capture. Ooh.
I fully agree with this one. This one resonates a lot with me because, you know, I get so wrapped up in the pursuit of creating a good video and coming away with like 6 or 7 killer images. Like I get so wrapped up in that I forget that, you know, I'm walking among giant, awesome trees and look at how beautiful it all is. And like, I don't stop and smell the roses nearly enough and I've been trying to work on this particular year, but you know, I agree with it. It resonates with me for sure.
I went to Asint a couple of weeks ago and I spent, about 4 or 5 weeks ago, I went to a place called Loch Stack, and it's one of my favourite places to photograph in Scotland. I just love it. It's absolutely fantastic. And I'm there with the van, and all night long I'm lying in the van. I could just hear deers rutting, calling out to each other all night long. It was just the most amazing. And I'm not a nature photographer. I'd love to be a nature photographer, but I'm not. But and the problem I had then in the morning, I tried to relay that to the camera, and I think that's my only downfall. I'm not eloquent enough to try and explain how I felt when I was lying, struggling to fall asleep because I could hear just the call of nature. Now I'm getting all soppy. But yeah, I do love that. I do. There's nothing better.
That was going to be one of my critiques about your videos, Gary, is there's not enough, tear-jerking moments where you're talking to camera with a tear rolling down your cheek, talking about how beautiful it is.
I wish I was more eloquent. I wish, because there are photographers, there are vloggers out there who are a lot more eloquent than I am, who can put that forward or put that across a bit better than me. Me, it's just like, it was good last night, I heard some deer rutting, and that's it, move on. It's like, no, it needs to be better than that, because I was sat there and I was emotionally attached to what was going on, and it was brilliant. But so that's my downfall. Okay, right. I absolutely love this one. Very quickly, return. Now, interesting to see what your thoughts are on this, because we didn't get to this yesterday. Return again and again to your favorite local location, or just forget your local. Just return to your favorite location and photograph the hell out of it. That way you'll see how and where your photography is improving. I was rather hoping it would go in a slightly different way to that. I think you'll learn more about photography. You'll learn to be a better photographer because it's difficult to go back to the same place over and over again. That's my take on that.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's difficult. And the reason it's difficult is you lose the inspiration and you're not motivated or inspired by your local area typically because it's normal. You know, wherever you live, that's normal. And it's really hard to be inspired by normal for me a lot of times because I'm excited by things that I haven't seen and the exploration part of seeing something new. But I do think that our best work as photographers typically comes pretty close to home. The reason for that is because you return over and over and you can, we talked about working a scene. Well, you can't work a scene more than one that you return to 100 times. Like you're going to know where the best images are to be had during what kinds of light conditions. And for me, as someone that's really inspired by dramatic weather and interesting skies and interesting weather, I find that I get my best work close to home because that's where I can be very flexible and react when something cool is going to happen. For example, this summer, we had this lightning storm come through. I thought I was just going to be chasing a lightning storm. So I was out there waiting for it. And then lo and behold, it was like this, a mesocyclone, however you say that. This is a supercell, which we don't get in the Pacific Northwest ever. That's like a Southwest kind of thing.
Sure.
And so here I am. Oh, there's this giant storm cell that is amazing coming right for me. And because I was close to home and I was there and I was ready for it, I got to photograph this really cool event. That stuff doesn't happen when you're just on a random photo trip because that stuff only happens when you're close to home. So I do agree with that, only in a different way, meaning that that's where you get your best conditions because you can be following the weather apps and be like, oh, there's going to be a chance of lightning or a chance of whatever it is. Go out and you can make yourself available for it because it's close to home.
You should live in the UK. We get everything in the UK. I mean, we get wind, we get rain, and we get fog. We get everything here in the UK. Everything.
That sounds kind of depressing, really.
I've seen your videos and I look at them thinking, we get nothing like that in the UK. Nothing. It's not I'm lazy. We have nothing like that in the UK. Every now and again we might get a big storm or we might get a few big waves crashing against a lighthouse, but we get nothing like, I watch your videos all the time and oh my God. Now you're depressing me. You're depressing me now.
We are quite spoiled, especially the part of the United States that I live in, because I can be photographing a desert in the morning, a rainforest in the afternoon, and then a beautiful volcano or a coastline in the evening. We're pretty spoiled.
But moving on from that one very quickly. But
Before you hate me any worse.
I do agree with that, Nick. I do. I think I always recommend people go back to the same place, not to take the same pictures, but just to better what you did before or to try and work it more, because try and avoid where you went before. And I just think, you have to work. If you have to work, you learn. It's as simple as that.
Agreed.
I don't know. Okay. Next one. Another 3 words. Print your work. Susan Brews, how you say Susan. Print your work. Print your damn work.
Agreed. Absolutely agree. I think that's something I need to do a whole lot more of. And the problem becomes, like, if you're somebody like me that has so many images, you don't even know where to start printing your work because I haven't been printing nearly enough in the last 3 years. It's a little bit overwhelming. Like, where do I start? Which work do I print? And it's a lot easier if you're printing as you go rather than get to a place where I'm at where, I had a museum reach out to me about putting up a gallery. I can't even cull my work down to a gallery showing with like 100 pieces because I don't know where to start. I have to have a theme of some kind. It's a good problem to have, but it's a problem nonetheless because if I would have been printing this whole time, I wouldn't have that issue. So definitely need to print your work. It's the best way to see your work.
I think the job is complete once it's printed. I really do. I do. I've got a thing about photography competitions as well. I hate digital photography competitions. That's a horrible thing because, a picture is how it's presented, not somebody zooming in, looking for faults, looking for this, looking for that. At the end of the day, it's how your image is presented to somebody. And it means a lot to print. It really does.
Yep. I agree.
We had, just very briefly, we had Thomas Heaton here probably a couple of years ago now, and he did a talk at my studio, and I did a 20-minute chat before he came on. It was a bit of a warm up, and I slagged off all the. I'm going to make a video on my printing techniques, which is crazy, but I won't spoil it now. And so I started going on about people that regurgitate nonsense on YouTube, and he stood at the back, and then he came on to do his show, and then he said, just so you know, Gary, my last video I put out 2 days ago was all about printing techniques. And of course, I just not slagged him off and never would do. But he's so thanks for that, Gary. And I'm like, oh no, I could have died. I don't think I've ever apologized to him for that.
Oh, that's funny.
But print your work. Yeah. Yeah, we're really good friends, Tom and I. He just doesn't know it yet.
He's a good guy.
Last one. No one ever got better without practice. That could be said for anything and everything in life. But yeah, absolutely. Practice.
Yep, there's nothing to disagree with in that sentence. I think that, I think yesterday we talked about a couple comments that were something like along the lines of stop watching YouTube and get out and shoot. And yes. I agree with those. I think that there's a lot of people that they just don't have the availability to get out and practice as much as they would like. But even just little practicing at home, you get home from work and set up like a little tabletop studio and photograph some action figures or something. And anytime you have the opportunity to hold a camera in your hands, it's going to make you more familiar with it. You're going to be a better photographer for it. One of the best things that I did when I was, growing as a photographer is I was a portrait photographer and a wedding photographer and a real estate photographer and a product photographer and a sports photographer. I did all of these different genres of photography, and it all made me better at landscape photography because I understand all of that stuff. And any chance you have the opportunity to hold a camera in your hands and use it, it's going to make you better. Cool.
And I agree with that one wholeheartedly. So there you go. So that's the top 15, seriously, from just shy of 200 tips that people said. It's taken me two or three days to collate. Well, I actually whittled them right down to 35, like I said earlier, and that's the top 15. But you guys up to press have seen all 35 tips that I shortlisted. So thank you very much, Steve, for sending them in. Before I make the draw, there's a couple of funny tips on here, so we won't comment on them, but I'll just read them out if you don't mind, Nick. It says here, leave your partner. Now, I love that, 3 words, leave your partner. Remember, these are funny tips. It says, this is so true. It's so true. Listen, if your friends or partner are not photo enthusiasts like you are, right, leave them at home. Go out alone. And it's so true.
Very true.
It's so true.
You're either on a photography trip or you're not. There's no in between.
Black and white, end of, yeah. Somebody's put here, don't forget your camera. Okay, so your chance to get your own back on me now then. It's very important not to forget your camera, especially when you go out on a vlog with another photographer. I want to brush over that one because that was me earlier on this year. I went out, I was in a rush. I can't begin to explain what was going on at home, but I just jumped in the van and I rushed out, and I was about 45 minutes into my journey, and the wife rang me up and said, "You've left your camera at home."
I'm guessing that week's video is a short one.
Yeah. First thing, I swear, right, that I said to her on the phone, just remind me again of what I do for a living.
Total pro move right there.
It's like leaving your football boots at home if you're a football player. Anybody got a size 11? Anybody got a spare pair of boots? Yeah, so I actually went and I just helped my mate with his vlog, and I was there like a Burke with no camera. Very quickly, don't take up photography because you will never have any spare cash again.
So true. There's no more expensive hobby than photography. There's never an end to it either.
Tell your other half you win all your photography gear off YouTube video competitions. Cheers, Steve. Somebody's going to win this in a sec, by the way. 1 sec. Two more, I think. Two more. Oh, this is interesting. Use your bra. It says, went out in the cold, tuck your spare batteries in a cup of your brassiere. Not sure how this would work for blokes. Have you seen my man boobs? There you go. And that has been sent in, by the way, by Lizzie. It says Lizzie Hankin. So she said that. So that's not me being sexist. A lady's actually sent that in to me. That's probably quite a good idea.
Yeah, that would work. I mean, yeah.
Let's leave it at that. Let's leave it at that.
Yeah, there's nothing that I can say there to add to that in any constructive way.
So, right. So the only way, the fair way I could do, I've thought about doing this, is I'll put everybody's names up on the screen now, and the numbers are next to the names. And sorry, I obviously can't ask Nick to do this. So look, there's no hands. I'm going to give it a shake, and I'm just going to throw my hands in there and pull a number out, and whichever number corresponds to the name wins this bag, since that's what this is all about, Nick. Because when you and I are blethering away all this time, it's actually for a very good reason, because I'm trying to give a bag away to somebody. And it's number 47. So number 47, and that's Duncan Spence. Duncan Spence. There you go, Duncan Spence. So congratulations, and just so you know, I'm going to randomly choose another one, so they're not all number 47. Duncan Spence is actually my brother-in-law. No, he's not. Number 37. That's number 41. Look, so just all random. So obviously, just trust me on that. So congratulations to Duncan Spence. That's number 6. That's it. What more can I say? It's been an absolute delight, Nick. I can't thank you enough. You know, I think highly of you. I'd love nothing more in the future than to go out, meet you, and do a vlog with you. But that's for another day. I
want to bring you over here where we have interesting weather and we have dramatic seascapes. You know, I think you would enjoy the Pacific Northwest for sure.
No, come to the UK and see our fog.
Well, you know, like I love me some foggy forest scenes. So that would probably, I could come for a week and that would probably be plenty.
Nick,
no.
If you got a spare room, by the way,
I need to spend a lot more time in the UK because it's, you know, obviously the home of golf. I want to spend quite a bit of time over there. I don't know if I'll have a camera in my hand the whole time, but there's definitely a lot of beauty to be seen over there.
If ever you want to meet up with me and fall out with me, let's get together and play golf, because you'll soon fall out with me.
Well,
you realise why I'm a 24
have a friendly
handicapper.
wager on it, you know.
No, Nick, thank you very much indeed. Thanks for giving up your time, and hopefully you guys out there have appreciated the fact that Nick has given up his time. Thank you so much, Nick. Thank you.
No problem at all. Mate. It's always a pleasure to talk with you, Gary.
Cheers, mate. Thank you. Right, there you have it. What a fantastic set of photography-related tips. Thank you guys out there for providing them. Congratulations to Duncan Spence as well for winning that fantastic Compagnon camera backpack, and also a special thanks to Nick Page for helping and contributing towards this video. And hopefully you guys out there will agree with Nick and agree with myself, but of course, you know, they're only our interpretation of these tips. If you don't agree, then, you know, fine, not a problem. Leave a comment below, and of course, if you found this video useful, do me a favor, help support the channel, give me a thumbs up and subscribe if you're not already a subscriber. Congratulations, Duncan. Cheers, Nick.